So here's the problem that you had to do on your own. Again, we're using the zero product property, stating that if either of these are zero, then the whole product will be zero. So we're going to look at what makes x minus 5 equal 0. And we're going to look at what makes x minus 1 equal 0. And so we add 5 to this one, we get x equals 5. We add 1 to this one, we get x equals 1. So my solutions are 5 and 1. And again, if I plug in 5 over here, I get 5 minus 5. That makes 0. And it doesn't matter what this is over here, because 0 times anything is 0. And if I plug in 1 over here, I get 1 minus 5, that's negative 4. And 1 minus 1, that's 0. That's 0. Everything times 0 makes 0. Okay? So the zero product property tells us that if either of these are 0, it makes a true statement. So we are searching for the two values that make that 0. So let's move on to our second part of our success criteria today, and that is factoring. So let's look again at factoring. And again, we're going to pull it back, and I'm going to tell you some things that you already know, okay? So way back in the day, you learned in multiplication that these two things that we multiplied to get 12 were called factors, right? And we could make a list of all of the factors of 12, right? The factors of 12 are all the numbers that we multiply to get 12, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, okay? They have a lot of, this has, what was that, six different factors, okay? What factoring is factoring is the act of finding what numbers or expressions, maybe we'll, let me need to cross that out. The act of finding what numbers or expressions were used or were multiplied in an expression. And we're going to do a couple different types of factoring in this chapter. The first of which is going to be factoring out the greatest common monomial factor. So we're going to take I'm going to erase what we got here, and because I want to think about some of the things that we've done in this chapter. One of the things we did in this chapter was that we took a monomial, right? That's a monomial. Whoop. Monomial. And then we multiplied it by, say, a binomial. And we did that by distribution. And so we got 12x cubed plus 24x squared. Okay? So this was multiplication. Now, what we're going to do with factoring is we're going to take this expression and we're going to find the greatest common factor. That is, what's the number that is biggest that multiplies evenly into 12x cubed and 24x squared? And then we're going to do what's called factor it out. Meaning we're going to undo the multiplication. In essence, what we are doing in this section and on is we are undoing the multiplication that we did in sections 8.2 and 8.3. So we have to kind of look at this and say, okay, what's the biggest common factor? Biggest common factor between 12 and 24. What's the largest number that multiplies into both 12 and 24? As it turns out, it is 12. Now, what's the biggest number that multiplies between x squared and x cubed? And here's where, you got to kind of think a little abstractly. The largest number here is going to be x squared. And that's because x squared times x is x cubed. So that's that multiplies into x cubed. So we can factor out, right? We're going to factor out, in quotes, the 12x squared. And then what we have to do is take our term that we went in here, and we're going to divide them both by this thing that we factored out. Notice that what we're doing is kind of like the opposite of this. We multiplied up here. So now we're dividing down here to undo it. So this is 12x squared times 12 divided by 12 is 1. X cubed divided by x squared is x. 24 divided by 12 is 2. X squared divided by x squared is 0. So here we have our factored version. It is factored because I took out what I put in. And again, I could redistribute this and go 12x cubed plus 24x squared, and I would have this same piece that we had up here. Okay, so finding the greatest common factor, we factor it out, and then we undo the multiplication with the division. Okay, let's look at another example. Let's look at two more examples here. So we want to find the greatest common factor between 12x and 42y. So let's find that greatest common factor. The biggest number that multiplies between 12 and 42. Well, 12 doesn't go into 42, so that doesn't work. What about 6? Okay, 6 multiplies into 12. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 7 is 42. So we have 6. And then is there something that multiplies between x and y? Nope, there isn't. So our greatest common factor is 6. So we're going to factor it out, right? Factor it out. So I'm factoring it out, which means I'm going to take everything on the inside and I'm dividing it by the greatest common factor. So this is 2x. This is 7y. And that is the greatest common factor. That has factored out the monomial. And again, notice I can check my work, right? I can check it because if I were to take 6 times 2x plus 7y and redistribute it, I'd get 12x plus 42y. All we're doing with factoring is undoing the multiplication, right? We're just undoing the multiplication. Let's do this last one, and then you should try something on your own. All right, so we want to find the greatest common factor between 4x to the 4th and 24x cubed. So let's look at the numbers. 4 and 24. Well, 2 goes into both of them, and 4 goes into both of them. Okay, 4 does go into both of them. So I can factor out my greatest common factor. There's 4. And both of these are x's. I have x to the 4th, and I have x cubed. X cubed being the greatest common factor, because I can take x cubed times x equals x to the 4th. Therefore, x cubed is the greatest common factor. So 4x cubed, okay, we're going to factor it out. 4x cubed. We have factored it out. Now I need to take that number and divide it by each term. And what do I get? 4x cubed times 4 divided by 4 is 1. And x to the 4th divided by x cubed is simply x. 24 divided by 4 is 6. X cubed divided by x cubed is 1. And so that's my factored answer. And again, we can check ourselves, right? 4x cubed times x plus 6. If I distribute, that's 4x to the 4th plus 24x cubed, right? So it checks out. We can go back and forth. All right, this was a pretty long video. Go ahead and try one of these on your own back on your Canvas notes.